It's January 29th. The 1099 deadline is January 31st. That's 2 days from now. If you haven't filed your 1099s yet, I need to tell you exactly what's about to happen, how bad penalties can get, and what your options are at this point. I'm Bev from bookkeepingcoach.net. I've been doing bookkeeping for 30 years, and every single year I get panicked calls on January 29th and 30th from business owners who just now realizing they're about to miss the deadline. So let's talk about what happens next. Here's what happens when you miss the January 31st deadline for 1099s. First, let's be clear about the penalties. If you file after January 31st, but before February 15th, that's the 15-day window. The penalty is $60 per form. So if you have 20 contractors who need 1099s, that's $1,200 in penalties. If you file after February 15th, but before March 31st, the penalty is $120 per form. Same 20 contractors, now $2,400 in penalties. If you file after March 31st or don't file at all, it's $310 per form. That's $6,200 with a maximum penalty cap of $630,000 for larger businesses. But for small businesses, the cap is $5,400 for the lowest tier. So even if you have 50 contractors, you'll hit that cap. But here's what most people don't realize. These penalties are automatic. The IRS computer system tracks this. When the deadline passes and they don't receive your filings, the penalties start accruing automatically. There's no grace period. There's no "I didn't know" exception. The penalties hit immediately. I had a client last year who missed the deadline by 3 days, just 3 days. They filed on February 3rd. They owed $60 per form for 32 contractors. That's $1,920 in penalties for being 3 days late. They called the IRS and tried to get the penalty waived. "We were just a few days late. Can you give us a break?" The IRS agent said, "The penalty is automatic. I can't waive it. If you want to appeal, you can submit a written request, but it'll likely be denied unless you show reasonable cause." What's reasonable cause? Things like your house burned down and you lost all of your records, your bookkeeper died unexpectedly, natural disaster. Being busy or forgetting is not reasonable cause. So my client paid the $1,920 in penalties for being 3 days late, but the penalties are just the beginning. The bigger problem is what the late filing triggers. When you file 1099s late or you don't file them at all, the IRS computer cross-references what you reported paying to contractors against what those contractors reported as income. If there's a mismatch, which there almost always is when 1099s are late or missing, that triggers a red flag in the IRS system. The red flag leads to one or two things. One, the IRS sends you a letter asking for documentation about those contractor payments. They want to verify that you actually paid what you said you paid, that these were legitimate business expenses, and that the contractors were properly classified. Or two, they'll flag your business for a potential audit. Not an immediate audit necessarily, but your return gets marked for closer review. And that makes it more likely you'll be audited in the future. I had another client who didn't file 1099s at all one year. They thought, "It's not a big deal. The contractors will report their income anyway." Wrong. 3 contractors didn't report the income. The IRS sent my client a letter asking about $47,000 in contractor payments that weren't matched with reported income from the contractors. Now, my client has to prove they actually paid those contractors and the payments were for legitimate business purposes. They need canceled checks or bank statements showing the payments. They need contracts or invoices showing what the work was. They need to track down contractors who may have moved or changed phone numbers. It turned into a 6-month nightmare dealing with the IRS. At the end of it, they still owed the penalties for not filing the 1099s on time. Plus, they owed additional penalties for failure to furnish correct payee statements because they never gave the contractors their copies of the 1099s. Total penalties, $8,200. Plus about $4,000 in accounting fees to deal with the IRS correspondence and documentation requests. All because they didn't file 1099s on time. And here's the really frustrating part. If they had just filed the 1099s on time in the first place, all of this could have been avoided. The 1099s themselves don't cost anything to file if you do it electronically other than the software fees. The only cost is the time to prepare them or the fee to have someone prepare them for you. So if you're sitting here on January 29th and your 1099s aren't done yet, what are your options? Option 1, you scramble and try to get them done in the next 2 days. This is possible if you have everything you need, if you know exactly who needs 1099s, if you have all their information, including social security numbers or EINs, their correct mailing addresses, and if you know how to file electronically with the IRS. The challenge is that most businesses don't have all of this information readily available. You need to pull payment records for the entire year, identify which payments require 1099s and which don't, track down W-9 forms from contractors who haven't responded to your requests, and figure out the IRS filing system. And if you've never filed 1099s electronically before, you need to register with the IRS for their fire system, which can take time. You might not be able to complete the registration by January 31st. Plus, if you make mistakes, like wrong social security numbers, incorrect addresses, wrong payment amounts, the IRS will reject your filing. And by the time you find out it was rejected and fix the errors, you might be past the deadline. Option 2 is you accept that you're going to be late and you file as soon as you can to minimize the penalties. Remember, the penalties increase the later you file. So filing on February 5th is better than filing on February 20th, which is better than filing on March 15th. If you're going to be late anyway, at least minimize the damage by filing as soon as possible. Option 3, you hire someone who can do emergency 1099 preparation. Someone who knows the system, knows what information is needed, knows how to file quickly and correctly. This costs more than regular 1099 preparation because of the time pressure, but it might be your best option at this point. The worst option is to do nothing and hope the IRS doesn't notice. They'll notice, the penalties will hit, and the longer you wait, the worse it's going to get. Now, there are some specific things that have to happen to get 1099s filed correctly, even at the last minute. First, you need to identify every person or business you paid $600 or more for services in 2025. There are 12 specific types of payments that require 1099s. Not all contractor payments require them. Payments to corporations are generally exempt, except for attorneys and medical providers. Second, you need complete information for each recipient: legal name, mailing address, and taxpayer ID number. If you don't have W-9 forms on file, you need to contact these people and get the information immediately. Third, you need to prepare the forms with the correct amounts paid. The amount on the 1099 should match what you actually paid them, which should match what you deducted on your tax return. Fourth, you need to file copy A with the IRS electronically if you have 10 or more forms, or by paper if you have fewer than 10. And fifth, you need to provide copy B to each recipient by January 31st as well. So they need to receive their copy by the deadline, not just have it mailed by the deadline. There are 8 different ways this process can go wrong, even when you're trying to do it correctly. And when you're rushing at the last minute, the chances of errors go up significantly. So here's the reality. If you're at January 29th and your 1099s aren't done, you're in a tough spot. You can try to do it yourself in the next 2 days and hope you get everything right. But if you make mistakes, you're still facing penalties when the IRS rejects your filing. You can accept that you'll be late and try to minimize the damage by filing as soon as possible after the deadline. Or you can get help from someone who can navigate this quickly and correctly, even under time pressure. What you can't do is ignore it and hope it goes away. The IRS doesn't forget about 1099s. The penalties are automatic, and the longer you wait, the more expensive this gets. If you're in panic mode right now because the deadline is 2 days away and your 1099s aren't done, I can help. I do emergency 1099 prep where I work with businesses to get their 1099s filed as quickly as possible. I know what information is needed. I know how to navigate the IRS filing system, and I know how to minimize errors that would get your filing rejected. If we can get your information together today or tomorrow, there's still a chance to file by the deadline and avoid penalties entirely. If we can't make the deadline, I can at least get you filed quickly after the deadline to minimize those penalties. I've put a link in the description below where you can book an emergency call with me. We'll assess where you are, what information you have, what's missing, and create a plan to get this handled as quickly as possible. Time is critical. Every hour counts at this point. The link is in the description. Book a call now. Look, I know this is stressful. The deadline is 2 days away and you're realizing you're not ready. It happens. I see it every year. But don't let the stress paralyze you into doing nothing. That is the worst possible outcome. Take action now, even if it means you'll be a few days late. File as soon as you can. And next year, start this process in January so you're not in a panic mode next year. If you found this helpful, subscribe to the channel. The link is in the description if you need emergency help. 2 days left. Let's make them count.